The nuclear submarine USS Leviathan lay motionless 400 feet beneath the Pacific surface, its reactor core temperature climbing toward catastrophic meltdown. Every nuclear engineer the Navy could summon had tried and failed. Radiation levels were spiking. 140 sailors had maybe 6 hours before their underwater tomb became permanent. Then, a helicopter landed on the support vessel above, and among the latest experts stepped a woman in civilian clothes carrying nothing but a worn leather toolkit and clearance documents that made the Admiral's face go pale. Those clearance documents? They carried a security level that officially didn't exist, a classification so high that even the Admiral, a man who'd spent 30 years in naval command, had only heard whispers about it in the deepest Pentagon briefings. Because what was walking onto that carrier deck wasn't just another expert. It was someone whose very presence meant the Navy had exhausted every other option. Someone they called only when the impossible had already happened, and only the impossible could fix it. If you believe that true heroism often wears the quietest disguise, and that the most extraordinary people are hiding in plain sight around us every day, then you've found your community. Subscribe to join thousands who celebrate the unsung heroes whose stories deserve to be told. Hit that like button to help these hidden stories reach others who need to hear them. And tell us in the comments, from which corner of the world are you watching this unfold? But to understand why this woman could make an admiral's blood run cold, we need to go back 72 hours. 72 hours earlier, Dr. Marina Blackwell was writing what she thought would be just another routine consultation report in her quiet Massachusetts office. But her phone rang with a number she recognized and dreaded. At 45, with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun, Marina had spent the last 5 years working in civilian nuclear safety. She'd previously worked at the Pentagon on classified projects, but now preferred a quiet life. The phone call that would change everything came on a Tuesday afternoon while she was reviewing safety protocols. The autumn light filtered through her office window, illuminating stacks of technical manuals and radiation monitoring equipment. When her cell phone rang, she recognized the number. Pentagon, Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program. These calls rarely brought good news. "Dr. Blackwell," she answered curtly. "Marina, this is Captain Rebecca Torres from NNPP. We need immediate consultation." Marina knew Torres from previous operations. They had worked together during the classified reactor upgrades of 2018. If Torres was calling personally rather than through official channels, the situation was serious. "What type of consultation?" "Classified submarine emergency, Pacific Fleet. Details can't be given over the phone, but immediate deployment is required." Marina hesitated. Until 5 years ago, saying yes to such calls was automatic. But the USS Thresher incident had changed that. The long-term effects of radiation exposure shadowed her medical checkups. Her last screening had shown cellular changes attributed to radiation exposure. "Rebecca, I'm no longer active duty. I work as a civilian consultant." "Marina, 140 lives are at risk. Reactor emergency. And there's no one else with your expertise." The words hit Marina like a physical blow. 140 lives. Marina's mind flashed to that night on the USS Thresher. 95 crew members, 20 minutes from reactor meltdown. That decision had changed everything. When? Helicopters coming in 2 hours. Direct transfer to Constellation. Marina glanced at the radiation dosimeter on her desk. Still working, still taking readings. After USS Thresher, she had to constantly monitor exposure. "Okay. But Rebecca, this is the last time. I understand." "And Marina, thank you." As Marina packed her equipment, she thought about the path that led her here. Born in coastal Maine, she had always been fascinated by invisible forces that powered the world. Nuclear engineering seemed like the perfect blend of physics and application. Her personal radiation detection equipment filled a specialized case, devices unavailable to most nuclear engineers. Custom-built dosimeters, neutron flux analyzers, emergency medical supplies. 2 hours later, Marina was airborne in a Navy helicopter. With her were standard radiation protective equipment and her personal toolkit. But the real asset was the knowledge in her head. procedures developed through 15 years of handling nuclear crises. During the flight, the co-pilot briefed her. "Ma'am, USS Leviathan is a Virginia-class attack submarine. 48 hours ago, during routine patrol, reactor problems started. Primary cooling system failed, backup systems showing systematic failures." Marina listened carefully despite the helicopter's noise. "Crew size? 140 personnel, ma'am. Current depth 400 feet. USS Constellation carrier group positioned as surface support. How many reactor experts already involved?" 8 nuclear engineers working on the surface. Dr. Elizabeth Montgomery is leading the effort. Progress has been minimal. Marina knew Dr. Montgomery. Brilliant engineer, but theoretical knowledge exceeded practical field experience. Montgomery had never faced a life-threatening reactor crisis. As the helicopter approached USS Constellation, Marina studied the massive carrier. Unusual activity on the flight deck. Extra helicopters, additional equipment, signs of crisis. The cold Pacific waters pressed against USS Leviathan's steel hull. This Virginia-class nuclear submarine now lay helplessly on the ocean floor. Inside the reactor compartment, alarms echoed and red warning lights cast ominous shadows. Commander Victoria Reese was a veteran officer with 15 years submarine experience. 3 deployments, 2 Pacific patrols, 1 Arctic mission. But this was her most challenging crisis. In the control room, radiation monitoring equipment constantly alarmed. "Status report, Mr. Webb," Reese directed to her nuclear engineering officer. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb had worked with nuclear propulsion systems for 12 years, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, nuclear engineering, naval nuclear power school training. His knowledge was exceptional, but this crisis exceeded textbook approaches. "Ma'am, complete primary cooling circuit failure. Backup systems showing sequential failure pattern." Webb's voice was strained. "Pattern suggests systematic causation, not random equipment failure." Reese considered the implications. Systematic failures could indicate sabotage or design flaws. Both were disturbing possibilities. "Time frame for critical status." Webb consulted radiation readings and reactor temperature data. "Best case, 6 hours. Worst case, if cooling completely fails, 2 hours. Reese felt the weight of 140 crew members' lives. Every decision could affect them all. Options were extremely limited. "Maintain surface communication. We need technical assistance from the carrier group." Meanwhile, aboard USS Leviathan, the crew experienced mounting pressure. In the mess hall, conversations were hushed, faces tense. Petty Officer Miguel Santos, 23, sat with his meal untouched. "How bad is it really?" asked Seaman Jennifer Park, 19, and on her first deployment. Senior Chief Robert Tank Sullivan, a 20-year submarine veteran, looked up from his coffee. His weathered face showed concern, but his voice remained steady. "Bad enough they're calling outside help, but we've got the best people working on it." What Sullivan didn't mention was the conversation he'd overheard between engineering officers. Words like catastrophic failure and evacuation protocols weren't part of routine discussions. In 2 decades underwater, he had never seen officers look this worried. In the submarine's cramped sleeping quarters, sailors tried to rest despite constant vibration of failing systems. The normal rhythmic hum had been replaced by irregular grinding sounds and persistent whine of backup systems running beyond design limits. Chief Petty Officer Maria Gonzalez had quietly prepared the sickbay for potential radiation exposure cases. The psychological pressure was as dangerous as the technical crisis. In confined submarine operations, crew morale could mean the difference between life and death. Chief of the Boatmaster Chief James Franklin moved through the submarine's compartments, his presence reassuring younger sailors. "Listen up, people," Franklin addressed a group of nervous seamen in the torpedo room. "We've been in tough spots before. Remember the ice incident in the Arctic 2 years ago? We came through that because we kept our heads and did our jobs." His words carried weight because the crew knew Franklin's reputation. The crew trusted him completely. In the engineering spaces, Lieutenant Junior Grade Rachel Morrison monitored reactor instrumentation when she noticed something alarming. The readings didn't match anything in her training manuals. The patterns seemed almost organic, as if the reactor core was developing its own rhythm. "Mr. Webb, you need to see this," Morrison called, voice tight with concern. Webb hurried to her station. The neutron flux readings showed an irregular pattern, not dangerous yet, but definitely abnormal. As a nuclear engineer with over a decade of experience, Webb had learned to trust his instincts. What he was seeing violated fundamental principles of reactor operation. "When did this start?" 20 minutes ago, sir. "It's subtle, but it's there. And it's getting stronger." Webb studied the readings more carefully. In nuclear engineering, subtle anomalies often preceded major problems. The reactor wasn't just overheating. Something was affecting its nuclear reaction patterns in ways that weren't supposed to be possible. "Get me a full spectrum analysis, run diagnostics on all neutron monitoring equipment, and Morrison." "Yes, sir." "This stays between us until we know what we're dealing with. No point in creating panic until we understand the problem." But Morrison noticed something else troubling. The backup monitoring systems weren't showing the same anomalies. Either primary monitoring was malfunctioning, or they were witnessing a phenomenon that backup systems weren't designed to detect. On the surface, USS Constellation's command center buzzed with activity. Dr. Montgomery's team had been joined by additional nuclear engineers and emergency response coordinators. "Admiral, we're getting unusual readings from Leviathan's reactor," reported the communications officer. "Their nuclear engineer is requesting consultation on neutron flux anomalies." Admiral Jonathan Hayes turned to Dr. Montgomery. "What does that mean?" Montgomery's face went pale. "Sir, neutron flux anomalies could indicate control rod malfunction or worse, actual nuclear fuel damage if reactor fuel assemblies are compromised." "Spell it out, Doctor." "We could be looking at a potential nuclear excursion, sir, not just meltdown, an actual nuclear explosion underwater." After landing, Senior Chief Rodriguez met Marina with skepticism. Civilian clothes, minimal equipment, unassuming appearance didn't match the typical expert profile. "Dr. Blackwell, welcome aboard," Rodriguez greeted professionally. "I'll escort you to the command center." USS Constellation's command center featured state-of-the-art technology. Multiple screens displayed telemetry data from USS Leviathan, reactor temperature readings, radiation levels continuously monitored. Dr. Montgomery and her team conducted detailed review of reactor schematics. Technical discussions, theoretical approaches, mathematical calculations. Impressive intellectual effort, but practical solutions remained limited. Marina quietly entered the command center. No one gave immediate attention. Another civilian contractor, they assumed. Marina positioned herself on the perimeter, observing activities. Admiral Hayes requested a situation update from Dr. Montgomery. "Doctor, current assessment." "Admiral, catastrophic failure confirmed in reactor primary cooling system. Backup systems experiencing systematic failures. Root cause determination requires physical access." Dr. Montgomery briefed Marina on both the cooling crisis and potential fuel assembly damage. "Dr. Blackwell, we're not just dealing with cooling system failure. We may have compromised nuclear fuel." Marina studied the neutron flux data transmitted from USS Leviathan. Her expression grew serious as she analyzed the patterns. "This isn't fuel assembly damage," she said finally. Dr. Montgomery looked confused. "Ma'am, the patterns clearly indicate—" "No, they indicate resonance cascade in the reactor core. I've seen this before." Marina's voice carried weight that made everyone pay attention. "This specific pattern occurred during the USS Thresher incident. It's not fuel damage. It's harmonic resonance in neutron flux caused by cooling system vibrations." "What does that mean?" Hayes asked. "The reactor is trying to compensate for cooling loss by automatically adjusting neutron production. But the compensation system is creating feedback loops that could lead to rapid power excursion." Dr. Montgomery studied the data again. "I've never seen anything like this in the literature." "Because it's classified," Marina replied. "This resonance cascade has only occurred 3 times in naval reactor history. USS Thresher in 2019, USS Michigan in 2016, and USS Connecticut in 2014. All classified incidents." Hayes felt a chill. What happened to those submarines? USS Thresher and Michigan were saved. USS Connecticut... Marina paused. USS Connecticut was lost with all hands. The resonance cascade led to rapid criticality and nuclear explosion at depth. The room went silent. This wasn't just about saving 140 sailors. This was about preventing a nuclear disaster that could affect the entire Pacific region. Dr. Blackwell, what stopped the cascade in successful cases? Manual insertion of emergency neutron absorber rods directly into the reactor core. Someone must physically enter the reactor compartment and manually trip the emergency neutron absorption system while simultaneously restoring cooling. Dr. Montgomery shook her head. That's impossible. Radiation levels would be lethal within minutes. Not impossible, Marina corrected. Extremely dangerous, but not impossible. I did it on USS Thresher. Hayes studied Marina with new respect. You manually entered a critical reactor core? I spent 14 minutes inside a reactor experiencing resonance cascade. The radiation exposure should have killed me, but I had the right protective equipment and knowledge of exactly which systems to target. Marina approached the meeting table. Excuse me. Her voice calm but assertive. Could I see the operational schematics? Dr. Montgomery looked annoyed. I'm sorry, operational schematics? Current displays are training configurations. Real operational layouts are different. I need to see actual reactor modifications, specific system configurations, field updates. Dr. Montgomery became defensive. Ma'am, these are USS Leviathan's official reactor diagrams, the most detailed versions available. Marina shook her head. Negative. These are public domain versions. Classified operational schematics include backup systems, emergency protocols, specific modifications. Admiral Hayes focused on the conversation. Dr. Blackwell, what is your clearance level? Marina produced a small identification card and placed it on the table. When Hayes examined it, his expression changed. The clearance level was higher than most personnel in the room. Senior Chief Rodriguez, provide Dr. Blackwell with classified access. Minutes later, Marina studied the actual USS Leviathan reactor configuration. The schematics were significantly more complex, with details previous engineers had never seen. Marina pointed to a specific location. Here, secondary cooling circuit modification, a feature not in standard Westinghouse design. Dr. Montgomery examined closely. This modification is unfamiliar, not in standard documentation. 2018 Special Operations Modification, Marina explained. Additional cooling capacity for extended deployment. In case of primary system failure, secondary transfer isn't automatic. Manual activation is required. The silence revealed Marina's knowledge depth. Admiral Hayes focused more closely on her. Dr. Blackwell, how do you know these modifications? Marina hesitated briefly. I worked with similar systems during classified operations. Dr. Montgomery intervened. Manual activation procedure? Is remote execution possible? Negative. Physical access from reactor compartment necessary. Emergency manual override panel is in immediate vicinity of the reactor core. Hayes's expression became serious. Radiation levels are lethal. Personnel entry is impossible. Manageable, Marina stated quietly, with appropriate protection. The room silenced. Dr. Montgomery looked shocked. Ma'am, radiation levels are fatal. Protective equipment is insufficient. I have previous experience in such conditions. Marina's voice was determined. I'm familiar with radiation exposure protocols. Hayes approached Marina. Dr. Blackwell, who are you? Really? Marina paused momentarily. She produced an additional document and placed it on the table. When Hayes opened it, his eyes widened. USS Thresher Incident 2019. Primary Reactor Specialist. Was this you? Dr. Montgomery raised her head. USS Thresher? Isn't that incident classified? Affirmative, Marina confirmed calmly. Prevented reactor meltdown in 20 minutes. Saved 95 crew members. Hayes closed the document. And you physically entered the reactor core? With radiation suit, yes. No alternative for emergency manual override activation. The room atmosphere transformed completely. Marina wasn't simply a civilian contractor, she was a specialist with proven experience in nuclear reactor crises. At USS Leviathan, the situation continued deteriorating. Commander Reese received latest radiation measurements showing increasing criticality. "Sir, reactor temperature rapidly approaching critical threshold," Lieutenant Commander Webb reported. "Without corrective action, core meltdown is inevitable." Lieutenant Morrison approached with neutron flux analysis printouts. "Commander, we have a secondary problem," Morrison said quietly. "The neutron flux patterns suggest possible resonance cascade. If we're right, this could escalate beyond meltdown." Reese understood immediately. This wasn't just cooling failure anymore. Reese contacted radio. "Surface control Leviathan. Status critical. We have potential resonance cascade in addition to cooling failure. Immediate expert consultation required." The message sent shockwaves through Constellation's command center. "Dr. Blackwell, if this is resonance cascade, how long do we have?" "Based on these readings, maybe 4 hours before it reaches critical resonance. After that, USS Leviathan becomes a 7,000-ton nuclear weapon." As Marina prepared for descent to USS Leviathan, she made one final equipment check. This time, she added something she hadn't mentioned, a small device that looked like a radiation detector, but was actually something far more specialized. "What's that?" Dr. Montgomery asked. "Neutron flux stabilizer," Marina replied. "Experimental technology. If the resonance cascade is too advanced, this might be our only chance to interrupt it." "Experimental." "Developed after USS Connecticut. 3 prototypes exist. This is one of them." The mission wait was unprecedented. Marina needed to restore cooling to save the crew and stop a nuclear resonance cascade that could devastate the Pacific Ocean. As the deep-sea rescue vehicle descended toward USS Leviathan, Marina reviewed everything she knew about resonance cascade events. Radiation levels during resonance cascade were nearly 3 times higher than normal critical levels. Even with the best protective equipment, she had maybe 8 to 10 minutes before radiation poisoning became irreversible. "Ma'am, visual contact with USS Leviathan," reported DSV pilot Lieutenant Commander Walsh. "We're reading unusual electromagnetic activity from the submarine." Marina checked her instruments. The electromagnetic readings were consistent with neutron flux resonance. They were running out of time. When she finally entered USS Leviathan, Commander Reese met her with obvious relief but also apprehension. "Dr. Blackwell, neutron flux readings are getting worse. Our nuclear engineer thinks we have maybe 2 hours. "You have less than that, Commander. We're dealing with resonance cascade. I need immediate access to the reactor compartment." "Ma'am, our latest readings show radiation levels at nearly 800 Röntgens per hour in there. That's beyond lethal." "I know," Marina replied simply, "but it's the only way to save your crew and prevent a nuclear disaster." As Marina prepared to enter the reactor compartment, she thought about the 140 people whose lives depended on her actions. "Commander, if I don't come out, you need to emergency blow ballast tanks and surface immediately. Get as far from this location as possible." "Promise me, Commander." Reese looked into Marina's eyes and saw determination of someone who had faced this exact situation before. "I promise." At the reactor compartment entrance, Marina performed final equipment check. Radiation detector gave warning signals inside the suit. "Commander, extract me after 20 minutes, Marina stated as she opened the door. The reactor compartment interior was more intimidating than Marina's previous experience. Metal structures surrounding the reactor core had an ominous appearance under red alarm lighting. The electromagnetic humming from neutron flux resonance was audible even through her protective suit. Marina located the emergency manual override panel in immediate proximity to the reactor core. To pass through thick protective barriers, she utilized specialized tools. Each movement consumed precious seconds, radiation exposure accumulated. 15 minutes elapsed, Reese's voice transmitted via radio. When Marina reached the manual override panel, she discovered additional modifications unlisted in schematics. The panel had extra safety locks requiring additional steps beyond standard procedure. "Command, manual override has unexpected complexities. Additional time necessary." "Ma'am, radiation exposure reaching dangerous levels. Immediate extraction recommended." Marina assessed the situation. Current abandonment meant no second opportunity would be available. Negative command. Continuing procedure completion. Marina initiated disabling additional safety locks. Each lock demanded a specific sequence. Her radiation detector indicated dangerous levels. The neutron flux stabilizer device showed readings confirming her worst fears. The resonance cascade was accelerating faster than her calculations predicted. 18 minutes. Reese's voice was more urgent. Marina made a critical decision. Instead of just activating the cooling system, she would simultaneously deploy the neutron flux stabilizer. It was a procedure never tested under actual combat conditions. When the final safety lock was disabled, Marina pulled the manual override lever. Immediately, reactor compartment sounds changed. Secondary cooling system activation initiated, but neutron flux readings were still climbing. Marina quickly moved to neutron absorber rod controls and activated the experimental stabilizer device. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then, gradually, the electromagnetic humming began decreasing. Neutron flux readings stabilized, then began dropping toward normal levels. Secondary cooling online. Neutron flux stabilizing. Reese's voice filled with relief. On the return journey, Marina experienced severe radiation exposure effects. Not just nausea and dizziness, but muscle weakness and difficulty focusing. She had absorbed more radiation in these 20 minutes than in any previous mission. Extraction complete, Reese reported. Dr. Blackwell transferred to Medical Bay immediately. Upon return to surface, USS Leviathan's reactor was not just stable, it was operating more efficiently than it had in months. The neutron flux stabilizer had not only stopped the cascade, but optimized reactor performance. Admiral Hayes visited Marina in the medical bay. She was receiving intensive radiation treatment, but her condition was more serious than after the USS Thresher incident. Dr. Blackwell, you saved 140 lives and potentially prevented a nuclear disaster that could have affected the entire Pacific region, Hayes said. After an extended pause, Marina stated, Admiral, this is classified information. The USS Thresher incident was only the beginning. Past 15 years, involvement in 7 nuclear crises. This was the most dangerous. The neutron flux stabilizer, where did that technology come from? Developed in secret after USS Connecticut was lost, 3 devices exist. This was the first field test. And it worked? Marina smiled weakly. USS Leviathan is proof it works. But Admiral, I can't do this anymore. The radiation exposure from this mission, it's cumulative. My body can't handle another crisis like this. Hayes understood. Marina had given everything to save not just 140 sailors, but potentially thousands who would have been affected by a Pacific nuclear disaster. Dr. Blackwell, what happens to the technology? The neutron flux stabilizer will be integrated into all naval reactor emergency systems. Future crises like this can be handled remotely. No one else will have to enter a critical reactor core. 3 days later, USS Leviathan reached safe port. Reactor completely stable, crew secure. But Marina Blackwell didn't disappear this time. She was transferred to Walter Reed Medical Center for extended radiation exposure treatment. In the crew's final briefing, Commander Reese stated, Today, 140 lives were saved and a potential nuclear disaster was prevented through a civilian consultant's extraordinary courage. Senior Chief Sullivan retained memory of Marina's work style in the reactor compartment, her professional confidence, and the way she handled technology none of them had ever seen. Sir, that woman wasn't an ordinary civilian, Sullivan observed. She had equipment and knowledge that seemed beyond anything in our manuals. Reese agreed. That's confidential, Chief. But accurate assessment. She possessed exactly the required knowledge and technology to handle a crisis we didn't even know existed. 6 months later, Marina was medically retired from all nuclear emergency response duties. The radiation exposure from the USS Leviathan mission had been too severe for her to continue active work. The cumulative effects of 15 years of high radiation missions had finally caught up with her body. At Walter Reed Medical Center, where Marina spent 3 months recovering, her case became a classified study in radiation exposure limits. The medical team was amazed she had survived the radiation levels absorbed over her career. Her body showed cellular damage consistent with exposure levels that should have been fatal. Dr. Patricia Henley, her oncologist, reviewed Marina's medical files with professional curiosity and personal admiration. "Your cellular regeneration patterns are unlike anything we've documented," she told Marina. Marina's response was characteristically understated. 15 years of practice, doctor. You adapt or you die." But her legacy lived on in ways that extended far beyond medical curiosities. The neutron flux stabilizer technology was quietly integrated into all U.S. naval reactors. The procedures she developed for handling resonance cascade events became classified training material for emergency response teams worldwide. Captain Rebecca Torres visited Marina regularly during her recovery. During one visit, she brought news that would have been impossible to share with anyone else. "Marina, the technology you field-tested on Leviathan has already been deployed twice. Once on a British submarine in the North Atlantic, once on a French nuclear vessel in the Mediterranean. Both times, potential cascade events were stopped remotely using your stabilizer design." Marina smiled weakly from her hospital bed. "That was always the point, Rebecca. The best heroism is the kind nobody ever hears about." In a secure facility beneath the Pentagon, Marina's personnel file underwent its final classification update. Admiral Hayes himself wrote the summary. "Dr. Marina Blackwell represents the highest ideals of service and sacrifice. Her innovations in nuclear emergency response have fundamentally changed our ability to prevent maritime nuclear disasters. Her willingness to risk everything for the safety of others embodies the finest traditions of naval service." At the Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program, Marina Blackwell's file was updated to Emeritus Ghost Asset. Her active service was complete, but her knowledge and innovations would protect naval personnel for generations. Young nuclear engineers studying reactor emergency procedures would learn her methods without ever knowing her name. The protocols she developed would be standard training, taught as established procedure rather than revolutionary innovation. But perhaps the most fitting tribute came from an unexpected source. In the crew quarters of submarines across the fleet, a new tradition emerged. When nuclear engineering officers completed their first successful emergency response using Marina's protocols, veteran crew members would raise a quiet toast to the ghost engineer. They never used her name, never spoke of specific missions, but they remembered that someone had walked into the heart of nuclear hell so that others might live. The tradition spread through the submarine community with the same quiet efficiency that had characterized Marina's entire career. No official recognition, no public acknowledgement, just the quiet respect of those who understood what true courage looked like. Dr. Marina Blackwell, ghost engineer, lifesaver, hidden hero, the woman who prevented a nuclear disaster that could have changed the Pacific Ocean forever. Hidden Heroes Stories. Subscribe for more untold tales of those who serve in the shadows.